law enforcement situations. Call in 847-931-1410. Ask us questions. We will get you answers every week, Saturday, noon to 1 on 1410 AM WRMN Elgin. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. Chat with us on WRMN's YouTube live channel.
Chicago defense attorney Mark Schieblo has co-authored the book titled DUI Jury Trial, which is a true story of a DUI case that he defended. The accused was an Illinois truck driver arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. This book contains facts about the case from the date of the arrest up to the jury's verdict, and this nonfiction novel also includes the transcripts from the jury trial itself. The book DUI Jury Trial is now available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Fixed Bayonets, brothers and sisters, we're back with hey Paul, we're back with another episode of Chief Guard of the Republic every Saturday, noon until 1, here at the Studio 14 in Elgin. The phone number here to call in is 847-931-1410, or you could send a text at 505-926-1410, or you could just hit us up in the chat on the YouTube live channel, which I love streaming, and we're on there. So last week we talked about the ascension, the list of ascension to the presidency according to the president's cabinet that President Truman had set up in 1947, and it actually was one of the amendments, the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, and everyone always claims 25th Amendment, if the president is incapacitated or something, they should evoke the 25th Amendment and replace him. But really, it came down to, in dire matters, who would ascend to the presidency if the president, vice president were not fit to serve or were incapacitated in some way. So we decided that we're going to talk about the actual amendments to the Constitution today. There's 27 of them. And I'd like to start out with Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 of the Constitution is the way you can put an amendment in place. Now, the important thing is the Constitution of the United States is a hard document. It does not grow by itself. It does not shrink by itself. There are processes in place to make a change to it. Once these changes are in place, which we call amendments to the Constitution, then they are constitutional by definition. and the Supreme Court, which can strike down a lot of laws, which are not amendments to the Constitution, they're laws, the Supreme Court can say those laws are unconstitutional, but the Supreme Court cannot, on face value, because it's amendment to the Constitution, say that an amendment is unconstitutional, because it has become part of the Constitution, all right, which the growing document, right now the document is fixed, it is capable of growing, but the only way to grow and or shrink it is by an amendment. So you could have an amendment to take out certain parts of the Constitution, whatever, but pretty much they just add things in there to further describe what rights are. And the first 10 are the Bill of Rights. And they were actually installed into the Constitution by Article 5. And it wasn't, Article 5 says that Congress, both houses of Congress, need to pass a resolution for an amendment to the Constitution by a two-thirds majority vote, a supermajority vote, two-thirds. I guess supermajority is 60 votes, but you're talking about 67 votes in the Senate, and a proportional amount. I don't know the exactly. What's 435 divided by times 2/3? Matt, our producer here,
I will figure it out. So what is it again?
400.
It would be like 66 point something % of 435.
Yeah. It's going to be about 300 and something.
So it's, I'm sorry. So
One,
it's four.
you take 435 and multiply it by 0.666.
289.71.
So that would be 290 votes, all right, to have a two-thirds majority there. Because if you only had 289 votes, you would not have a two-thirds majority. So with that amount of votes, then it's not a constitutional amendment yet, even though it was a super majority there. It has to be passed on to the states. So now the state legislatures, not voted just by the state citizens, their legislatures have to vote on it, and that becomes a 3/4 majority. So a full 36 states, I think 36 or 38 states. Yeah, I think
75% of 50.
Yeah, so the 75 divided by 37.5, 38 states. So 38 states would have to vote to approve that now that we have 50 states. All right. So it is a very difficult process to get
Well, there's also another way, though.
Yes.
2/3 of the state legislatures can ask Congress to call a convention, and a convention then would then propose it, and then that's another way where it could be approved by a convention of 3/4 again, 3/4 of the states would approve it in a convention.
Yes, and the only time that has happened is when the original Bill of Rights was sent in. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, but they just called Bill of Rights, but there were actually 12 amendments put forward during the original convention. 2 of them did not pass. I'm remiss in what the 11th was. I could look that up real quick. But the 12th one actually passed much later, and it is our last amendment to the Constitution. The 27th Amendment was originally going to be the 12th Amendment in the Bill of Rights, but it did not pass the states. All right, so we got that. So we know how the Constitution could be amended. So the first amendment that they made is the freedom of speech. They say this is the most important amendment, and I agree, because unlike any other, we're the only country that has true freedom of speech and a defense of such. Sometimes it's abused by the people in power. It's misinterpreted or it's misapplied. They have a thing called hate speech. Now, there is no such thing as hate speech. It's a free speech, and some speech tells people how actually intelligent you are, and other speech tells people how dumb you are. And I want people to let me know exactly how dumb they are all the time. I would like everyone to be walking around with an IQ meter on, but they won't do that. It's like, oh, well, I'm not going to, that guy's got a very low IQ. I'm not going to listen to what a lot he says. Aside from that, you have free speech. So people go out, you don't need the IQ meter. They let you know. So, now, if you stop them from talking, then you're going to have a problem, because now you can't tell whether this guy, he doesn't have his meter on. So, they try to say the hate speech, it's just speech. Now, there are some things that are rude and crude and socially unacceptable, and that should be self-policing. What I mean is, if you're on the airways, all right, and the trouble is with television or radio or that, is that you can't plug up kids' ears or cover up their eyes all the time. So impressionable children have not hit the age of reason, which is legally defined right now as, like, in the state of Illinois, is 18 years old, right? So you don't want them seeing a lot of this stuff because they're still formative, right? So they put a little bit of censorship on there, right, for the free airways. But if you go on the internet, man, there's all sorts of stuff out there. All right, so that's socially unacceptable. It should be self-policing. I mean, if one of the big broadcasters was out there and their radio broadcasters, someone like myself, very famous international radio star, it was to swear all the time, just curse and swear and use bad language, then people would stop listening to me, and then the radio station would shut me down. They're like, we can't have you out there. All right? So this should be self-policing in society. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to have laws on it. All right? People should ostracize you and ignore you when you're behaving like that. All right, Paul, I'll leave you with the second one.
I want to go. It also, the First Amendment covers the freedom of the press, which we technically are, and the freedom to assemble and the freedom of religion. That's what also makes us unique.
Yeah, many countries out there, they oppress a lot of the religions, even the ones you wouldn't think would be oppressed anymore. Some countries are total, what do they call it? They're religious ground, let's say like Iran, right? They have
totalitarian, yeah.
Totalitarian, and the religious leaders have control even over the, quote, non-religious politics. They're absolutely in control. And so,
go ahead.
So it becomes illegal to have a viewpoint other than that of the state religion, right? So is that really free? And we can't really enforce that on other countries. We could do it by the way we deal with them, but yeah, or a country like China that flatly outlaws being a Muslim. You know, I don't think Muslims are allowed in Japan either, or to stay there. But yeah, we have a free. You could be any religion you want in the United States, so long as it doesn't support the violent overthrow of the government of the United States.
Or not have a religion too.
Yeah, not having a religion is a religion.
Right. Now, the Second Amendment is what we know as the right to keep and bear arms, and also the militia. And a lot of people think that this is important because it's the one that kind of protects the First Amendment, as it's been said. But this Second Amendment has been subject to several court cases over the last several hundred years. So it's an amendment, and it's in there for us.
Yeah, and the people, there's a lot of these amendments have two parts. I think the Second Amendment isn't quite clear. It's short, you know. A well-regulated militia being necessary to security of a free state, comma, right? So a well-regulated militia, and it states there, being necessary to security of free state. So now you have to take that as gospel. It's right. Making that's a truth. That if you don't have a well-regulated militia, you can't have a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So who makes up your militia? The people.
People from the state.
The people, not the government. The people, all right? And I've had people say, oh, well, because they put militia there, it only applies to National Guard members. Well, the militia back then, it really wasn't everyone. Every male, right, which was considered a citizen back then, they didn't consider women to have the right to vote or anything, but every male was required to have a rifle, was required to present himself when his militia got called up, and was required to fire 2 shots on the battlefield, bare minimum, all right? So every male, every citizen capable was required to have that, every adult male of a certain age, right? So the militia was everyone, was the people. As soon as is the person that has the right to vote, the citizen. As soon as you give a person the right to vote, they become part of the militia, whether they know it or not. Now, the National Guard, people say that's the militia, the Minutemen. Yes, it evolved from that, to have a professional army, to have people that were trained and volunteered and ready to go. Yes, the National Guard's there. So right of the people who keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's everybody. Laws are made it doesn't even say here that Congress can make laws or anything on that. Some of these amendments say that Congress can enforce this with laws, but it does not. It doesn't say that a felon can't carry a gun. All right. It doesn't say, certain. If you're convicted of certain crimes, you can't carry a gun. But what happens is, if you're not allowed to vote, you're not really a full citizen anymore. Therefore, you're not part of the militia because you have no skin in the game because you can't vote. Therefore, do you lose your right to bear arms? And I guess I'm not a Supreme Court judge. I'd like to get them all lined up and start asking them these questions, But we're just going on a rough outline. We don't have a lot of time today. Oh, we could always continue on next week if we run out of time, right, Paul?
Right.
So here's one. How do you interpret the no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a matter to be prescribed by law?
Well, they were afraid because of the American Revolution that the British were taking over homes and things like that, and they were staying there, and they wanted to make your home. And it actually ties in with the next amendment, actually. But they wanted your home to be sacred and free from, because in England, the king owned everything. He owned your home, he owned your neighbor's home, because you were there to the benefit of the king. Here, we are free. We're free of the king, and we have our own stuff. Our house is our sacred home, and we don't let troops in here other than, in a method prescribed by law.
And that's only, nor in time of war, all right? Be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, right? Nor in time of war, but in a matter to be prescribed by law. So during peacetime, it says flat out there, this is the way I interpret it. I consider myself a reasonable man. A lot of people wouldn't consider me reasonable, but I do consider myself a reasonable man. And in peacetime, government has no right to throw people into your house, to board them there without your consent. But in wartime, that's different. All right? So the government might decide that, hey, we're drafting a lot of people, we're bringing them in, we don't have places to put them before we embark them in a port, and they're just hanging out there. So we're going to tell people they got to take like 4 or 5 guys and let them sleep on the sofas and stuff. And that would have to be a law which would be passed by Congress again. So now the next one, Paul, you're saying this is this is one of the most important ones. I love it because, I want to get the doormat that says, come back with a warrant.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by an oath or affirmation, and particularly described the place to be searched and the person or things to be searched and seized.
Yes. And that, just because you got a search warrant on someone's house doesn't mean you could search the entire house. And any judge that signs a search warrant that is so vague in that effect, it's open to that. Now you have a constitutionality thing, even though they have a search warrant, right? And the search warrant is supposed to be by a reasonable person, right? That has probable cause, right? That knows, right? That has a reason to believe that you have something illegal or something that needs to be seized. And they got to say where it could possibly be, to come into your house or onto your person to search for that thing. All right. And a big thing is like the stop and search, right? Stop and frisk. All right. So I just can't, as a police officer, and I've done it as a police officer, but I don't randomly go up to people and say, hey, I'm going to search you, right? Because, I think 1 in 10 people have a gun, and you're going to be the 10th person I search today, so odds are you're going to have a gun. That's not reasonable, right? That's probability, which probability can't be. So I have to be able to articulate that I saw this guy constantly pulling up his pants. He's wearing clothing that isn't, that, you know, like it's a real hot summer day and he's got a long jacket on. You know, he keeps hiking it up. And, you know, I have to articulate the reasons that I believe this man may be carrying an illegal weapon, right? So it could be as easy as me walking up to a guy and going, hey, do you have a concealed carry license? And he goes, no. And then I go, do you have a gun? And he goes, yes. Well, now do I have probable cause to search him for that gun?
For officer safety, you would.
For officer safety, but he already told me he had one.
Right.
So that all right. So even if I'm not a lawyer, right? But they have to be very specific, and also least intrusive thing. The least intrusive thing. So going back when the FBI went to search Mar-a-Lago, and all the things came out, and they were going into the 13-year-old son's room, and then into his wife's drawers. I mean, who hides classified documents, right? You don't really hide them. You store them securely, right? And if the President of the United States, and I've talked about this over and over, having been in military intelligence, if all classified documents, all classifications fall under one classification authority, just one in the United States. Only one person has classification authority, and that is the President of the United States. He also has declassification authority, all right? And so it's like they taught us in the military. If I'm in the general's office, and he's a high officer and everything, not any more human than anyone else, right? But I'm sitting there and I'm his NCO or I'm his aide de camp, and he says, you know, I'd really like a cup of coffee. But he's never ordered me to get him a cup of coffee. Now, is that an order? We call it an implied order in the military. He doesn't have to come right out and say it, all right? So if the president and the president alone, not a vice president, not a secretary of state, not a secretary of defense, not a national security advisor, the president and president alone, right, walks out with classified documents, he has in effect declassified those documents because he cannot violate his own self, right? It's probably poor practice, but he can't violate that. And I think they saw it. So when they went in to a rich guy's place, right, a rich former president, and they went beyond the scope of their search, right, I think they violated a lot of civil rights there. And so if they could do that to a rich guy and try that,
they could do it to us.
They could do it to us, but you need to know. If I did that as a detective, all right, this was the stuff that the feds, the FBI would put me in prison for if I did something like that, if I illegally searched and seized something, knowing that I was illegally doing it. But yet they do it with impunity. Okay, I'm getting off track here. So now the next one, and this comes up because a lot of things have been going on about this. And in the last Sunday, there was a big thing going on. The Fifth Amendment, and that's where you can't testify against. You can't be compelled to testify against yourself. And so when we come back from this break, we're going to be talking about the Fifth Amendment because it was in the news about a week ago, and I'll tell you why. Want to read some action-packed, exciting pulp fiction? Read the works of Michael Tooman, now featuring the international crime thriller, I Married a Bot Madam. Available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle editions. The paperback is also available at other book retailers. Check out Michael Tooman's webpage at Scilink.net. That's Papa Sierra Yankee Lima India November Kilo dot November Echo Tango.
Attention brides and grooms to be. Your dream wedding starts here. Join the Serendipity Collective, located in the heart of Hampshire, Illinois, for 2 incredible wedding expos, packed with inspiration, top vendors, and everything you need to plan your perfect day. First, on February 23rd, it's the Love is in the Air Wedding Expo at 1100 American Lane in Schaumburg from 12 to 4 p.m. This free event will connect you with the best in the biz. Discover everything from desserts to decor, and it's open to the public. Then on March 16th, don't miss the Lucky in Love Wedding Expo, located at Camp Big Timber at 37W 955 Big Timber Road in Elgin. Same time, same deal from 12 to 4, and it's for free. Email them at info@theserendipitycollectivellc.com. Don't forget, you can RSVP on their website or Eventbrite. That's the Serendipity Collective. Get ready to make your wedding day dreams come true.
Looking to stay informed on the political issues that truly matter? I'm Dennis Sonar Green, inviting you to join me every weekday from 4 to 6 p.m. on WRMN for A Political Talk Show. WRMN, the talk of the town, is where you'll find clear, balanced analysis of the day's biggest news. We dig into the headlines, cutting through the noise to deliver the facts and insights you need to stay informed. Whether you're deeply into politics or just want to understand what's going on, this show offers the depth and perspectives that matter. Tune in every weekday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on WRMN and be part of the conversation that's shaping our community. Let's navigate today's political landscape together on A Political Talk Show, only on WRMN, the talk of the town.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough. But if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. The Alzheimer's Association provides care, support, and research to help you take control of the situation with your family and manage the disease together. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. Visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Join your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt on our weekly radio hour, Chief Guard of the Republic, where we talk about all things national security, defense, personal security, safety, and dealing with law enforcement situations. Call in 847-931-1410. Ask us questions. We will get you answers. Every week, Saturday, noon to 1 on 1410 AM WRMN Elgin. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. Chat with us on WRMN's YouTube live channel.
Fixed bayonets. Comrades, we're back for the second half of the Chief Guard of the Republic radio hour. Again, you can call us in at call in at 847-931-1410 or text us at 505-926-1410 or hit us up in the YouTube live comments. All right, so Paul, we're talking about the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. You always hear people claiming the Fifth Amendment. Why did they do that?
Well, it encompasses the right to remain silent, but it's also way much more than that. Because it says that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of an indictment of a grand jury. So in other words, there has to be some probable cause before this, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the military, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor, this is important now, nor shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy. That's the double jeopardy clause of the U.S. Constitution of life and liberty, nor shall be compelled in any case to be a witness against himself. This is the right to remain silent, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So it encompasses a lot of rights, and it requires a lot of things before that could ever happen.
Well, I think the first thing is like to define a capital offense. In my understanding, a capital offense is anything you go to prison for life, right? That the maximum sentence is life or the death penalty. That is a capital offense. Anything less than that is not a capital offense. So if you can only go to prison for 40 years, even if you get convicted and you're 80 years old, chances are you make it to 120 are unlikely. That's like a life sentence, but it's not a capital offense. The other thing is otherwise
infamous crimes. Yeah.
Otherwise infamous crime. So property crimes. Let's take a Bernie Madoff thing, right? Billions of dollars stolen, right? Just misappropriated, giant Ponzi scheme. You know, people should be wise to this, but they're not. He misrepresents it. It's fraud. It's not a capital offense, but it's an infamous offense. It destroys people's lives. How many people iced them, did themselves in, did harm to themselves, or were irreparably harmed, because of that? But not a capital offense. But I would say that was infamous. That's where the Supreme Court would have to get down to the dirty on that and say, now we got to define what's an infamous, because they said high crimes and misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are like driving without a license is a misdemeanor. It's like, whoa, we're going to impeach him. He decided to drive a golf cart without a license. So
it reflects the times when I was a kid, and there was it was before the 1970 Illinois Constitution, and people that had misdemeanor convictions were considered to be jailbirds, because the proper protocol was you don't get in trouble, but people were given these misdemeanor crimes, and people they were considered to be ostracized in jail. He's a bad check writer, but today it's all different.
Yeah, you could stack them up. You could even stack up felonies, and it's like
yeah.
That's where we're losing. You have government, and then you have self-government and self-correcting and self-cleaning, where, like you said, back in the 70s, you were good because if you weren't good, you were ostracized.
Right.
You were ostracized. So that kind of, most people would look at that when it starts becoming a badge of honor, how many felonies you racked up, right? Or how many misdemeanors you racked up and never did a day in jail. Woohoo! What's the point? But okay, so we get down there, and so when I'm talking, what's interesting on this? Okay, so they make it for the militia, land or naval forces are in the militia, and you're going back to the Second Amendment, which is the militia, right? But that is the people when they're called to the service of the government, like a draftee, part of the militia. He's a citizen. He's drafted in part of the militia. So that's in time of war, right? In time of war, or when serving in these forces. So naval forces and everything, which you have to give the commanders some military, uniform code of military justice. So you take these people out of there, and they're now under the uniform code of military justice. So the commanders have the military justice over them. So they don't need a search warrant to search your barracks room. Yep. They don't need one because you're in the military. It's basic. But what gets me here is on Monday, I mean on Sunday, or it was a Saturday or Sunday, a bunch of pardons went out last minute and pardoned people for crimes they hadn't committed, although a lot of people out there, there's been no proof of crime. I can't say anyone's a criminal, but no proof that's been brought and adjudicated in front of a court on some of this stuff. So if you were to call them in before and ask them about something that's a crime, right? So we give someone their rights. You have the right to remain silent. You know, anything you say can and may be used against you in court of law, right? So this guy no longer has that. Whoever's been pardoned, and he hasn't been charged with anything, right? So he's been pardoned for those crimes. The feds used to call Queen for a day. They say, listen, we're going to give you immunity. And they usually write up an agreement. We'll give you immunity, but you got to tell us everything you've ever done. You know, give us everything. If we find out you lied to us, it deal's off, right? Well, this is a pardon, and it's kind of like, oh, he can't be convicted of that because the president says, all right, now maybe state charges could be brought up, but on the federal level, no. So now that he doesn't have an expectation of compelled in a criminal case, there is no criminal case, right? Because he's been pardoned from any criminality. So it's not a criminal case. Maybe it's civil, all right? So since he has no expectation of a criminal case, does he now have a right to remain silent?
No, and he if he persists in pushing that, he would be subject to both civil and criminal contempt going forward prospectively.
Yeah, that's what I figured too. You know, I'm in agreement with you that. So if they do that, that would be very amusing, very, very amusing. I would get popcorn and I would actually turn on the TV and go to C-SPAN or whatever and go, whoa, this is going to be fun. But I don't really think there are some smart guys out there and smart women out there, but I don't think they're the total population of Congress. I think the people that get the bullhorn out there, you would be better off, you know, tagging someone in as a proxy, you know, to do the questioning for them. Like someone like you, a trained person questioning, you know, someone like me, an interrogator, go in there and question them instead of just screaming at them. So to get a little political, you know, I like Pete Hegseth, right? And we're getting a little off subject, but he was being questioned by Congress. And what's funny is the one senator screams at him, would you shoot unarmed protesters in the leg if you were ordered to? And I'm looking, who's going to order him to do that if he is the Secretary of Defense? He's like the number 2 guy. It's the president and him. You know, is the president going to order him to shoot people in the legs? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen ever. So how does someone, you know, they ask a question that's so hyperbolic, that's so unbelievable, you know, and they get away with it? Because I think people don't really expect them to be that smart.
Well, you know, they bring up the one thing that's never going to happen, but it is in the realm of possibility, and they use it to make it look like it's going to be real common. And they take the extreme or the outlier and you know, the thing that no one could prepare for, and they make it look like that's going to be a regular thing, and that's why they ask them those things.
Yeah, it's you know, I guess they were expecting upon the change of regimes to there to be, you know, post-apocalyptic future rioting in the streets, and we'd have to use the military to stomp down everyone and to get everything back in order, and we're going to have concentration camps, and we're going to throw these people in, and if they don't obey, all this stuff. And I knew it was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. But those people walking around with the low IQ meters on, they're like, oh, it could happen. It could happen. I could win the lottery tomorrow, too. It could happen. It could happen. I look forward to winning the lottery just like I look forward to Pete Hegseth shooting someone in the leg.
Right.
On order. not because he just wants to.
Well, the two things I'm waiting for are that meteorite to come into my property so I could get it, and to find the mastodon tusk in my backyard. But that's never going to happen either. So, you know.
There's a lot of clay in the Chicago area. So it's possible if you dug down, and if you go deep enough, you hit salt, right? A lot of the salt resources are underneath Lake Michigan. So they dig down deep and they're digging under Lake Michigan. What happens when that collapses in? You know, does Lake Michigan turn into the ocean and we get more sharks?
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is the Sixth Amendment, right? And that's always, and recently this comes up too. I mean, how come there hasn't been a challenge to this? It's the right to a speedy trial, right? The right to a speedy trial by an impartial jury, all right, in the state and district wherein the crime may have been committed, shall have been committed, right? Okay, so it says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime has been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature of the cause of the accusation, to be confronted with witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So we just had people getting released that haven't even been to trial after 4 years, over 4 years, and they haven't even been to trial. For misdemeanors.
Most of them, yeah.
So that's like, in the state of Illinois, for a misdemeanor where you don't have any continuances at all, what is the assumed speedy trial? It's 180 days on misdemeanor, right?
That's to the statute of limitations is a year and a half, 18 months. But the trial, it's the same speedy trial. It's if you invoke the Speedy Trial Act, it's 120 days plus one additional extension of 30 days. If you know, you basically you're talking about 4 months, and then you have to go to trial if you demand trial.
You see, that's one of the things. Having been a detective and having seen prosecutors and everything, if I get arrested for anything, I go up to court and I'm going to say, demand trial. And if the state goes, well, we need a continuance, Your Honor, it's not going to be by agreement. Because once they do that by agreement, it stops the clock, right?
That's correct.
I will never stop the clock. I've seen these guys, you know, they don't crack the books until the day of the trial. They're like, detective, tell me what you can about this case.
Whenever a case would be dismissed, there would be a notation on the file, because the defense would also always do this. Yes, Your Honor, and defendant demands trial respectfully. And then they would put in their case dismissed, DDT. That means it's so that they can never bring it back again after, if they don't do it within the 120 days.
So they dismiss the case, but they could bring it back in like 90 days. But if they dismiss it with prejudice, right?
Right.
It just says this case is dismissed with prejudice, that means it's done.
Right. And you still also defendant demands trial, even at that circumstance.
So that gets me.
It's interesting, though. It's interesting because whenever you go to the grand jury and you see people take the Fifth Amendment, especially in state court, the proper way to do it, I was going to tell you this, is to say, I decline to answer and invoke my rights under the First, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment and the 14th Amendment as it applies to the states. So whenever you do that, you're supposed to do it under the First,